Meine Damen und Herren,
Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends of CONVOCO, welcome to the 2022 CONVOCO Forum. Welcome both to those of you who are here in this room and to everyone who is following us today on Zoom. As you know, in 2002, CONVOCO's topic is Equality in an Unequal World. The topic is deliberately worded in this way. It's about equality, but we are all aware that inequality, that is, difference or the state of being unequal, is a basic characteristic of being human, because existence is defined in relation to difference. Talking about equality is not easy. There are many forms and expressions of equality: political, legal, economic, social, and, fundamentally, the moral equality of human beings, which goes back to the need to be the author of one's own life. In other words, ideas about equality vary from equality under the law to equality of distribution, the idea that everyone should have the same power, resources, and educational prospects, and thus the same opportunities and conditions. That was and still is the goal we are striving for. It is far from being achieved. And this prompts the question, can equality between people exist? Can it be created? And if so, what type of equality do we want? As history has shown, complete equality between people is impossible to achieve. This has been shown by history, and it is probably undesirable as well. Just think of the ever-increasing number of identity movements. Individuality means wanting to be different and therefore expressly not being the same. Identity and equality are, we might say, opposites. So equality must be redefined and rethought. The topic of equality cannot be seen as being linear. The struggle for equality, the struggle to achieve equality, is a multifaceted story with ups and downs, because the starting point of the equality we aspire to is always inequality. There are many forms of inequality. Each country has a different version. Even in Western Europe, inequality appears in different forms in different countries. Inequality is not the same everywhere. In short, not all inequalities are equal. And it's almost impossible to talk about equality in general. What is certain is that without a certain, that is, a high degree of social equality, there is a risk that the ideal of the common good will be lost. And the common good, there is broad agreement on this, is the foundation of a healthy society. Since the end of the 18th century, there has been a serious movement towards more and more equality. This journey involved several revolutions, 2 world wars, civil rights movements, and the formation of trade unions, and has led to today's movements, starting with Me Too and Black Lives Matter, which brings us to the identity movements of the last few years. And it is precisely here that we have to acknowledge that identity means being different and not being the same. So the aim is equality of the unequal, as our topic this year puts it, equality in an unequal world. What does equality of the unequal mean? Especially if equality between individuals does not exist. According to the old legal rule, it means treating that which is equal equally and that which is unequal unequally. It's important to recognize that equality between individuals only exists in terms of lack of knowledge, lack of ability, and lack of control. We are all equally helpless in the face of the big problems and challenges. This is a form of equality arising from helplessness, not from having power, as the thinker Boson Brooke has described it. We should not lose sight of this realization when we talk about equality, and we should not establish equality at the level of the individual, but rather at a macroeconomic level within our systems. Equality can be seen as an extension of freedom. Civil liberties are enshrined in our constitutions, both the negative and the positive. Freedom from and freedom to, as famously defined by Isaiah Berlin. The equal freedom to do and not to do at one's own discretion. Public and private autonomy are interrelated. In a democracy, this interrelationship offers the best answer in the quest for equality. Because a democracy entails political equality. This guarantees that participation in politics, at least at the level of the voter, takes the same form. It gives the individual the opportunity to help to shape the kind of country they live in and, at the same time, lead a self-determined life. Public autonomy goes hand in hand with personal autonomy. Individuals themselves, alongside their fellow citizens, are sovereign. To put it differently, democracy is founded on the moral equality of individuals, but the realization of democracy depends on the attainment of political equality. On the one hand, political equality is based on public autonomy, such as the right to a voice, and at the same time on private autonomy, such as the individual civil rights enshrined in our basic law. The civil rights that have been established and that exist in a democracy, as opposed to an autocracy, are the starting point for an equal society. In this way, equality is an extension of freedom. Similarly, the philosopher Tim Crane takes a few conceptual steps backwards when considering equality. In a CONVOCO podcast, he says that for him, it's about equality in relation to human dignity. Every individual and every group of people must be afforded the same dignity. He says equality is the equal recognition of dignity. More specifically, he says people are born equal in the sense that everyone deserves the same basic respect. That is the core notion behind equality between individuals. He's also referring to human dignity as laid down in our constitutions. He points to differences in material equality when he says, when people demand more equality, their underlying concern is usually that many people do not have enough to lead a dignified life. A society based on equality should give all people the same respect and provide them with the resources necessary to lead a good life. But not everyone should have the same things. Everyone should have enough. He goes on to say, even if you could raise everyone up to the same level of education, there will always be people who have more talent and thus are able to improve their position. And there's absolutely no reason why that should not be allowed. A society that prohibits people from improving their position would not be very desirable. Today, we have reached a new point in the development of equality. For a long time, the world was unaware of what the fall of the Iron Curtain meant for the world. The implications of the Soviet Union's collapse were misunderstood. The combination of geopolitical opening up and digital revolution has produced a global world, but not a universal world. This world is facing challenges such as climate change, which are affecting every country and every region. These global challenges and threats create and promote the beginnings of a global awareness and therefore the sense of there being one world. At the same time, these global challenges are creating a new form of global equality. Even if we are all affected unequally, we are all equally helpless in the face of these problems. Even if the world divides again, which is a real fear in light of the war in Ukraine, this time there will probably be a division between the world of liberal democracies and the world of autocracies. The global equality we have just described remains in place. In addition to this global awareness, people are realizing that humanity is not the master of creation, but a part of it. This means we exist next to one another and not above or below one another. Hierarchies are disappearing, which also creates a kind of equality. Equality despite and indeed because of inequality is the order of the day in our own interest. Major steps towards equality have always been the result of revolutions or wars. Today, it's the global threats we face that will call for more equality because they create new inequalities. Pandemics, climate change, and the resulting migration will force changes across the world, whether we like it or not. People and states are all equally helpless in the face of these global threats and challenges. Indeed, equal in their lack of knowledge and lack of ability, as we said before. History has taught us that it is better to embrace change and thereby have some chance of controlling it to a certain extent, rather than to resist it. We are all called upon to create more equality. It's in our own collective interest that the goal must be a fairer world. This afternoon, we will examine the topic of equality from different perspectives, but we will also look at the war in Ukraine from the point of view of inequality. What are the consequences of this crisis, and what will our world look like after the crisis is over? Is the war creating a new balance of global power that is perhaps the expression of a kind of equilibrium? We will discuss all of these questions. I am delighted to declare the CONVOCO Forum open. And I'd like to hand over to our first speaker, Jonathan Wolf. Joe is Alfred Lundecker Professor of Values and Public Policy at the Blavatnik School of Government at Oxford University. The title of his lecture is Distributive and Social Equality. A very warm welcome to you, Joe.